My relation by marriage handed me an eviction notice at my own dinner table 3 days after my boy's burial. She termed it a relocation strategy. I labeled it for what it was. My name is Leonard Ashworth. I am 64 years old and I have resided in this dwelling since before my boy discovered how to stride. What took place in the weeks after we interred him showed me something I ought to have known decades back. The individuals who mistake your stillness for fragility are always the most startled when you finally speak. Let me take you back to the start because the start matters. My boy Nathan passed on a Tuesday in late October. Black ice on the Trans-Canada just west of Thunder Bay. He was 41 years old. He traveled that stretch 100 times for employment. And then one morning he did not. The police officer who arrived at my door was younger than Nathan. I recall thinking that while he was speaking. I do not recall much else from that conversation. What I recall vividly is my daughter-in-law coming to my residence 40 minutes later, still clad in her office blazer, already on her mobile. She did not embrace me. She sat down at the dinner table where Nathan and I used to play cards, opened her computer, and started drafting lists. The funeral home, she stated. We must contact the funeral home. We as if she were doing me a courtesy by counting me in the phrase. Her name was Sandra Kowalik before she wed Nathan Sandra Ashworth. After she functioned in commercial real estate out of an office on Bay Street in Toronto, she was businesslike. She was poised. She was, as I would come to comprehend, already evaluating. Nathan and I had always been close in the manner that quiet people are close. Not a lot of talk, but a lot of comprehension. He had matured in this house in Sudbury in a sector where the trees came right up to the back boundary and the freezes lasted 6 months and nobody grumbled about it because that was just how it was. He shifted to Toronto for employment in his late 20s, encountered Sandra at a seminar and wed her 3 years later. They possessed a good life. I never meddled. When Margaret, my spouse, passed away from illness 4 years ago, Nathan started making the trek up from Toronto more constantly. Not every weekend, but enough. He would assist me with matters around the property, the dripping gutter, a stretch of barrier that needed fixing. We would sit on the back veranda in the evening and chat or not chat, depending on the night. Sandra came on occasion. She was always civil. She was always somewhere else in her thoughts. After the burial, which Sandra managed with the same sharp efficiency she applied to everything else, she lingered for 4 days. On the 4th day, she sat across from me at that dinner table and remarked very coolly that we needed to address my circumstance. My circumstance. I asked her what she intended. She stated that with Nathan departed, things would have to alter, that the residence was, of course, part of Nathan's holdings, and that as his spouse, she was the chief recipient, that I was welcome to remain through Christmas, but after that, we would need to resolve something more fitting for a man in my position, a man in my position. I was 64 years old. I operated a 10-year-old pickup with 200,000 kilometers on it. I donned the same 3 plaid shirts in rotation from October to April. I did not from the exterior look like a man who required to be managed gingerly. I remarked softly that I recognized her thinking of me. She took that as compliance. That was her first miscalculation. Sandra departed for Toronto the following morning. Before she reversed out of the driveway, she instructed me not to fret about the property tax demand that had arrived in the post. She would have her accountant review it. I nodded and gestured and waited until she rounded the bend. Then I went indoors and prepared coffee. I want to tell you something about heartache because people discuss it like it is one thing and it is not. In the first week after Nathan passed, I was mostly just deadened, passing through the days like I was beneath water. But beneath the numbness, there was something else. A very distinct, very chilly resentment. Not at the ice on the blacktop, not at God or destiny or any of those things you are supposed to strike at. At Sandra, at the manner she had walked through my dwelling after the service, opening cabinets, standing in portals with her head cocked slightly, auditing. I had seen that expression before. It is the expression realtors get the property tax demand she had offered to manage. That was curious to me because the property tax demand was addressed to Leonard Ashworth, not to Nathan's estate, not to Sandra, to me. Because this residence, this 2-story brick home on Lawrence Street in Sudbury, had never belonged to Nathan in any statutory sense. He had matured here. He had called it home, but the title had always been mine. Margaret and I purchased it in 1989, cash, mostly from the return of a smaller place I had owned before we wed. I was a certified electrician back then, and I had spent 8 years doing agency work in the mining branch. Inco then Vale saving prudently the manner my father had taught me. We reared Nathan here. We swapped the roof twice, the heater once and the kitchen tops when Margaret finally lost endurance with the old wood. The transfer had never altered. It had never needed to. Nathan recognized this, of course. He had seen the papers when he was helping me structure my records after Margaret passed. He understood the fiscal setup of our household well enough. What he had seemingly never done was clarify any of it to Sandra. This is the portion I have pondered many times since. Nathan was a decent man. He was also like his father, someone who expected folks would ask if they wanted to know. He did not volunteer data. He assisted his father practically. Drove me to the specialist twice a year, mended the drainage when he visited, transferred me funds for the new water tank when I was between contracts, and Sandra witnessed that charity and built her own interpretation of what it signified. She presumed Nathan was supporting a sinking old man. She presumed the home would pass to her because everything in Nathan's life must have stemmed from Nathan's labors. She was a property expert. She had never verified the land ledger. I found that truthfully almost amusing. Not amusing enough to tell her straight away. I needed to reflect. 2 weeks after the burial, Sandra called. She informed me she was returning up to Sudbury the upcoming weekend with an associate, a builder she relied on to get a notion of what alterations the dwelling might require before they listed it. Listed it. I remarked very quietly. That was a long journey for a weekend. She stated it was worth it to get the path advancing. She stated the Sudbury sector had actually been quite robust and she anticipated the place to sell swiftly once it was presented correctly. I remarked I would ensure the beverage was ready. She thanked me. She sounded comforted that I was being agreeable. I am going to be straightforward with you. Part of me wanted to inform her right then, present it plainly and sharply the manner she expressed herself and observe the realization strike. But I reflected on something my father used to remark when I was young, that the man who speaks too early forfeits his best position. So I waited. Sandra arrived that Saturday with her builder and a female I did not identify who turned out to be her associate from the Toronto branch. They walked through my residence like it was already a brochure. The associate made annotations on her screen. The builder pointed at the kitchen ceiling with a pen and referenced toxic material removal, which there was no ground for but which seemingly sounds imposing. Sandra talked about an open layout adjustment, erasing the partition between the kitchen and the parlor, the barrier Margaret and I had papered together in 1994, the one with the small pencil lines near the baseboard where we had charted Nathan's stature until he departed for academy. I sat in my seat in the parlor and caught all of this. At one juncture, the builder strolled up to me and remarked in that slightly too elevated tone some people utilize with senior men that the house had good framing. I informed him I knew I had selected the framing myself. He chuckled like I had crafted a joke. Sandra sat across from me before they departed. She stated she had been in touch with the Elders Lodge in the South End, a newer facility. She stated, very pleasant, very current, and that they had a single room vacant in February. She had spoken to someone there about my specific requirements. I asked what specific requirements those were. She stated that residing alone in a spacious home at my age was a lot to supervise. I informed her I had supervised it for 4 years since Margaret passed without any complication. She stated that was different, that Nathan had been there to assist. I viewed her firmly for a second. I asked her what precisely Nathan had assisted me with fiscally. She enumerated items. The water tank, a mouth operation 2 years back. Provisions, she believed occasionally. I remarked that Nathan had given me funds for the water tank and I had compensated him back within the month. That I had paid for my own dental work out of my savings. That Nathan sometimes brought food items the manner you bring someone items when you visit, not because they cannot purchase food, but because it is a thoughtful thing to do in a long journey. Sandra's face did something intricate. She stated that was not how Nathan had portrayed it. I asked her softly how Nathan had portrayed it. She paused. She stated he told her I was on a fixed payout and that he attempted to assist where he could. I am on a fixed payout. I remarked I am retired. That is what retired signifies. It does not signify what you seem to think it signifies. She departed shortly after. Her associate and the builder had already gone to their vehicle. I observed them reverse out of the track and then I went to my office. I have a fireproof document box in my office. It is steel, 4 units, and it has sat in that spot since 1997. Margaret thought it was an eyesore. I informed her that systematic files were a form of self-respect. We met halfway by placing a green on top of it. The green expired in 2003, and I never swapped it, but I kept the document box. I pulled out the lowest unit. The house contract was where it had always been. A wrapper marked Lawrence Street title, and by sitting between the wrapper for the truck and the wrapper for Margaret's settlement papers. I opened it and reviewed it, though I already recognized what it stated. Owner of account, Leonard James Ashworth. By date, March 22, 1989. No debt recorded. No partners entered. Mine without issue for 35 years. Beside the contract wrapper was another one I want to tell you about. After Margaret passed, I worked with a fiscal expert in Sudbury, a lady named Eleanor Park, who had been managing our assets since the late 90s. Eleanor had assisted me to align things after the estate cleared. We had shifted the mass of our reserves into a tax-free and a non-registered account, kept my annuity funds from my years with the electrical group separate, and systematic everything with a clear recipient layout. The sum, as of the last report in October, was not what Sandra envisioned when she thought about a 64-year-old widower driving old vehicle and purchasing with a senior's discount voucher. I sat in my office for a long span that evening. Then I phoned a solicitor. Her name was Patricia O'Shea. She possessed an office on Elm Street Central, and she had managed Margaret's settlement 4 years ago. She was collected and ordered, and she did not squander phrases which I valued. I brought her the contract. I brought her the property tax forms, 35 years of them, all settled by Leonard Ashworth, all provable through the municipality of Greater Sudbury's files. I brought her the government value notes, the protection policy papers, the power ledger accounts. I brought the wrapper Eleanor Park had framed outlining my asset accounts and the recorded recipients. Nathan's life coverage came up too. He had held a policy through his firm, a group perk, a large one. Sandra had already referenced it to me in the manner folks reference items they view as resolved. She had presumed she was the chief recipient. She was the alternate recipient. Nathan had designated his estate as chief with a specific terms directing those funds to me in the situation that he departed before me without offspring. He had done this according to the note he had left with the policy papers in my document box. He had given me a duplication years ago during one of his visits because he wanted to make sure I was secure if anything ever occurred to him. I sat with that for a spell after I found it. Patricia examined everything and stated plainly that Sandra had no statutory right to the house, no claim to the coverage funds, and no status to make any selections about the property. She stated we had several paths for how to advance. I informed her I wanted Sandra to comprehend this fully in a setting where it could not be recalled wrong or translated differently later. I informed her I wanted her to hear it the manner she had made me hear items clearly and in front of other folks. Patricia asked me if I was certain. I remarked I had been certain since the day Sandra sat at my dinner table and termed me a circumstance. Patricia made the steps. She reached Sandra's solicitor. Sandra had seemingly already engaged one, which informed me she had been moving quicker than I had detected and called a conference the following Thursday. Patricia urged Sandra's solicitor's office in Toronto, which was neutral ground. She also urged, and this was my inclusion, that Sandra be requested to have her real estate associate present, since that person had been caught in talks about the property. The associate appeared. The builder did not, which was fine. The legal boardroom on King Street was enough of a platform. I drove down to Toronto Wednesday night and remained in a lodging near the docks. I consumed breakfast alone and took a stroll along the water before the conference. It was early November, dark and chilling, the kind of freeze that rests into the blocks around Lake Ontario and does not depart until April. I have always preferred that kind of freeze. It is truthful. Sandra was already placed when Patricia and I arrived. Her solicitor was a younger man, very sharp, very poised. Her associate from the office sat to one side with her screen. Sandra viewed me the manner folks view you when they anticipate this to be awkward but manageable. She had the cool of someone who conducts tough chats expertly. Patricia placed 3 wrappers on the board. Sandra's solicitor opened by stating that his client was hoping to gain a mutually pleasant settlement regarding the holdings, that his client perceived this was a delicate hour and wanted to verify Leonard's requirements were addressed in the shift. Patricia let him finish. Then she opened the first wrapper and placed the contract on the board. She stated the property at Lawrence Street had been owned solely and permanently by Leonard James Ashworth since 1989. That Nathan Ashworth had no registered part in the property at any juncture. That Sandra Ashworth consequently had no right through legacy, survival, or any other path. Sandra's solicitor reached for the contract. He read it. He read it again. Sandra viewed her associate. Her associate was viewing the sheet. Patricia opened the second wrapper. 35 years of property tax slips, all delivered to Leonard Ashworth. All settled by Leonard Ashworth. Protection papers, utility ledgers, municipal records. Sandra's solicitor remarked softly that his client had not been informed of this layout. Patricia stated she understood that. She stated that regrettably being uninformed of the ownership layout of a property was a notable error, specifically for someone whose trade involved property deals. The associate's screen made no noise. I do not believe she was making lines anymore. Patricia opened the third wrapper. She clarified the life coverage policy, the firm group perk, the recipient name, the terms directing funds to my estate in the specific circumstances that had occurred. She stated the coverage firm had already been advised and the demand was being advanced accordingly. Sandra remarked something then. She stated she had not known. Patricia stated that was clear. Sandra viewed me, and for the first time since Nathan passed, she looked like herself. Not the model she had been presenting, not the businesslike one, the poised one, just a 40-year-old female who had lost her partner and had spent 6 weeks building a tomorrow from guesses and was now watching that building come apart in a boardroom on King Street. I want to be honest about what I sensed. Not victory precisely, something more nodded. She had handled me poorly. The eviction notice at the dinner table, the builder pointing at my roofs, the Elders' Home pamphlet, the word circumstance. Those matters were real and they had been unkind. But she had also lost her partner. Whatever her errors, that was real too. I remarked to her directly, Sandra, if you had asked me, I would have informed you. If you had asked me about the house, about the balances, about any of it, we could have had a different chat, one that was better for both of us. She did not say anything. I remarked, I understand you are mourning. I am too. But mourning isn't a ground to take what isn't yours. Her solicitor voiced something. She shook her head at him mildly. Patricia sketched the legal standing clearly. Sandra was welcome to gather Nathan's individual goods from the house. She was not titled to the property, the coverage funds, or any right against my estate. Patricia factored that Nathan's individual accounts, his vehicle, his Toronto flat, which was leased entirely in his name, his separate holdings, would be allocated according to his mandate, which did leave the bulk of those items to Sandra. She would not be left with nothing. She would not have what she had anticipated. That was different. We exchanged hands or something matching it in the entrance. Sandra's associate departed without making eye contact with me. The solicitor was professionally ordered. Sandra paused by the exit. She stated she was sorry for the manner she had spoken to me. I remarked I received that. She stated she had not realized about the house, about any of it, and that she had made guesses. I remarked that was distinct. I remarked that guessing is a practice that tends to be most costly precisely when you can least afford it. She nodded. She departed. Patricia and I walked out into the November freeze. She stated that had gone about as well as it could have. I remarked I thought so too. The journey back to Sudbury took 4.5 hours. I paused in Parry Sound for fuel and a hot drink. I sat in the truck in the lot for a few minutes before getting back on the route, looking at the trees and reflecting on Nathan. He would have found the whole matter softly clever. I believe he had gained my choice for restraint. He would have lifted an eyebrow and remarked something like, "Well, that is cleared then." He would not have made a delivery about it. I reached home around 10 o'clock, prepared bread and tea, sat in my seat in the parlor, the one that looks to the back glass where you can spot the white trees in the dark, if there is enough snow on the soil to throw the light. In February, I got a card in the mail. Sandra's script. She had shifted back to Winnipeg where her folks were from. She stated she hoped I was well. She stated she had been reflecting on items about Nathan, about the manner she had acted in those weeks after the burial. She stated she was not proud of it. She hoped I could comprehend that she had been terrified. I could comprehend that terror makes folks do items that look like harshness but are really just panic donning a different coat. I wrote her back a brief note. I informed her I hoped Winnipeg was good to her. I informed her that Nathan had spoken well of her and the years before matters had become tense. I informed her I did not carry any of it onward. I intended that. But I want to say one thing clearly to anyone viewing this who has been an alternate of what I went through. Maybe not this exact setup, but something like it. Someone who looked at your quiet life and resolved it signified you were helpless. Someone who mistook your endurance for assent. You are not bound to make yourself tiny to make someone else cozy. You are not required to adjust people immediately when they mistake you. But you are permitted, and I would say you are bound, to protect what is properly yours, calmly with proof in full light. Stillness isn't the same as concession. Sometimes it is just training. The house is still on Lauren Street. The white trees are still at the back barrier. The document box is still in the office, steel and unaltered, green-free since 2003. Some items don't need to alter just because someone resolved they should. If any of this touches you, if you have been sidelined because of your age, your quietness, your old truck, or your plaid shirt, I would like to hear about it in the notes. And if you know someone who requires this prompt, I hope you will share it with them. Until next time, I have thought a lot about what I would express if Nathan could catch me now. Not about Sandra, not about the contract or the boardroom or any of it. Just I believe I managed it the manner you would have wanted me to. Quietly with proof without making it more damaged than it required to be. That is the point about action and reaction that folks don't like to speak of directly. It doesn't require anyone's step. It doesn't need to be staged. Sandra made a line of selections in those weeks after Nathan passed, and each one tracked from the last with a kind of inner sense that I could not have crafted if I tried. She guessed. She acted on the guess. She involved onlookers. She put items in lines. She sat across from a property associate and outlined updates to a house she had never legally had any right to. And then the simple outcome of those selections arrived, not as penalty from anyone, but simply as the reality occupying the gap her guesses had left open. I did not do that to her. She did it to herself. I just did not halt her. That margin matters to me. I have never been cozy with the notion of payback as a target. It means you are still operating from resentment, still letting the other person fix the terms. What I did was more basic than that. I stayed patient. I collected my papers. I found a good solicitor. I selected the right minute and the right space. Those are not acts of payback. They are acts of self-respect. The complex piece, and I say this as truthfully as I can, is that self-respect requires you to actually recognize who you are. Sandra could only see what I seemed to be. An older man in a plaid shirt operating a truck with high distance residing in a house that needed new surfaces. She built her entire plan on that exterior. And I understand the pull. We all interpret exteriors. The difference is that a person of real sense discovers early and often that exteriors are unstable facts. Nathan understood that. He had observed me my whole life, and he recognized that the quiet manner I stepped through the world was not blankness. It was endurance. He used to say when he was a juvenile and vexed with something, "Dad, you never seem stressed." And I tell him that stress was mostly just imagery aimed in the wrong path. Better to aim it toward training. I am not a notably brilliant man. I am a retired electrician from Sudbury who kept his document box systematic and settled his charges on time. But I believe there is something in that in the order of keeping your own house, truly and otherwise. Recognizing what you own, recognizing what you have built, not requiring someone else to clear it for you. Sandra needed the world to view her as capable and in rule. And when Nathan passed and the framework she had built around that need started to feel doubtful, she reached for something hard. My house, my funds, my identity as a charge, and tried to make it hers. That is not harshness in the cleanest sense. That is terror moving quick. But terror that moves quick and doesn't pause to ask questions brings harm. And the harm it brings has a path of coming back around to its base. I hope she is doing well in Winnipeg. I intended that when I wrote it, but I also hope she discovered something she won't forget. That worth is unseen on the exterior. That guesses are a form of neglect, and that the quietest person in the space is often the one who is most prepared to.